friend caught me with AP, but I paid him to keep quiet. My husband found out and wants revenge now.
Reddit, long-time lurker here, but this is my first time posting. I need some advice, and I know that this is a perfect place to get some, hence why I'm posting here. I made a huge mistake, and now my husband is coming back not only at me, but also at his best friend. I cheated on my husband, and his best friend helped me hide it. Now my husband says he's planning the absolute worst revenge on me and his best friend, and I need advice on how to beg him. Let me give you some backstory. My name is Ashley, and I am a 29-year-old woman. I am married to my husband Richard, who is a 30-year-old man. We have been married for 5 years. We don't have any kids yet, as we wanted them later in life. We live in the United States. My husband's best friend is named Jared. I met my husband Richard when I was 22. I'd been giving online dating a shot for a while, hoping to find someone special. But after so many disappointing matches and awkward chats, I was starting to lose hope. It's not like I didn't believe in love or finding the right person. It's just that the whole online dating scene was getting old. Swipe after swipe, I began to think maybe real connections couldn't be made through screens and messages. After weeks of this, I was seriously thinking about deleting my profile. Then, out of the blue, I got a message my husband Richard. His message was simple and genuine, which caught my attention. So I decided to give it a shot and replied. We hit it off right away. Our chats were easy, and we found we had a lot in common. We talked about everything under the sun, and it felt like we'd known each other for ages. When we finally decided to meet in person, I was nervous but excited. As we sat in the cafe, chatting and laughing, I felt so special and free. It was like I could be myself around him, no pretense or awkwardness. By the end of the night, I knew there was something different about Richard. He made me feel comfortable and understood in a way I hadn't felt before. Before we knew it, Richard and I were officially a couple, and within a few months, we took the big leap and moved in together. It felt like a natural progression of our relationship, and living together only strengthened our bond. We spent 2 wonderful years together, navigating life's ups and downs as a team. We shared laughter, tears, and countless unforgettable moments. It was during this time that we both realized we wanted to spend the rest of our lives together. So, after much thought and heartfelt conversations, we decided to take the plunge and get married. It was a joyous occasion, surrounded by our loved ones. Richard worked in sales while I worked in human resources, and as a result, Richard was always on the move for his sales job, traveling far and wide to meet clients and close deals. His days were a whirlwind of airports, hotels, and meetings, while I held down the fort in my cozy office downtown. Working in human resources meant my days were more routine, handling stuff like employee benefits and payroll. Our lives were like 2 parallel paths, running alongside each other but never quite crossing. Richard would come home with stories of his travels, and I'd listen from our living room LOL. Sometimes the distance between us felt real, but we stayed connected through late-night calls and texts. In our home, Richard brought in more money, so he covered most of the bills, around 80%. Since I was around the house more, I took charge of keeping things tidy. While Richard hustled at work, sealing deals and meeting clients, I kept the home fires burning. That meant cooking, cleaning, and making sure everything was in order. Our setup might sound old-fashioned, but it just made sense for us. We both knew our roles and appreciated what each of us brought to the table. As Richard's trips became more frequent, I started feeling really lonely. Even though I kept busy with chores and work, there was this emptiness that stuck around, like something was missing. At first, I thought it was just a phase, but the loneliness kept growing. It wasn't just about missing him physically. It was like I missed having him around, his jokes, his warmth, everything. I'd count down the days until he got back, but even when he was home, things felt off, like we were drifting apart. I knew his job was important, but the loneliness was getting to me. I tried distracting myself with friends and hobbies, but nothing seemed to help. The loneliness just kept creeping in, making it hard to shake off. I knew something had to change, whether it meant finding ways to feel closer to Richard when he was away, or focusing more on things that made me happy. During that lonely stretch, I crossed paths with Vince, a friendly coworker with a good sense of humor. We hit it off and became pals. We'd hang out at lunch, crack jokes, and sometimes grab coffee together. Vince had a way of making me laugh, and being around him made the loneliness less heavy. As we got closer, I felt comfortable opening up to him. He was a great listener, always there when I needed someone to talk to. Before I knew it, Vince became a close friend I could rely on to brighten my day and chase away the loneliness. As time passed, Vince and I started flirting more. I knew it was wrong, but with Richard away so much, I kind of stopped caring about the consequences. Whenever Richard was out of town, I'd ask Vince to come over and watch movies. Our house was pretty fancy thanks to Richard's good salary, so it was a comfy spot for hanging out. Even though I felt guilty, Vince's attention helped fill the gap left by Richard being gone all the time. One night, I asked Vince to come over for a movie, and things got even flirtier between us. Honestly, I was so into it that I didn't even think about what might happen next. We cracked open a bottle of wine and started drinking. The flirting between us was intense, and before we knew it, we crossed lines we definitely shouldn't have, and we had sex. The next morning, I woke up feeling like garbage. I'd cheated on my husband. I was freaked out by what I'd done and kicked Vince out in a panic. But if I'm being honest, there was a part of me that kinda liked it. I was so dang lonely, and Vince filled a void I didn't even realize was there. Still, I knew I messed up big time. I tried to avoid Vince at work, but that didn't last long. Temptation got the best of me, and before I knew it, we were back to square one. Vince didn't let things get weird at work. He'd still bring me coffee, lunch, and shower me with compliments. Plus, he'd text me, and I didn't even bother blocking him. Before I knew it, we were back to where we started. In just a few days, we were sneaking around, having this secret thing going on. It was oddly convenient, especially with Richard always on the road. Vince would swing by my place and we'd hang out. His situation was similar. He had a girlfriend and lived with her, so his place wasn't really an option for our rendezvous. Sometimes Vince would fib to his girlfriend saying he had to work late, just to sneak over to my place. One evening after work, he showed up at my door. We usually drove and arrived separately to avoid suspicion. After we had sex as usual, Vince decided to order some food. He had to step outside the gate to pick it up. Unfortunately, my husband's best friend Raymond decided to drop by while Vince was outside grabbing the food. Vince hadn't bothered to put on proper clothes, so he was just in a t-shirt and boxers, as he just wanted to pick up the food and come back inside. Raymond caught on right away. I was busted, plain and simple. There was no way to dance around it. He looked like he wanted to bolt, but I chased after him, begging him not to spill the beans. I poured my heart out, telling him how lonely I'd been and pleading with him to keep it under wraps. I begged Raymond not to spill the beans to Richard, and he agreed on one condition: money. Turns out he'd actually come over to borrow some cash, but now he was demanding it as hush money. He wanted $2,000 and he promised to keep quiet if I paid up. I coughed up the money because I couldn't risk him telling Richard, but I made it clear that I wouldn't be his cash cow. If he thought he could keep blackmailing me, he had another thing coming. Of course he agreed. Raymond's situation kinda made me give him the money. He wasn't pulling in much himself and played the role of stay-at-home dad while his wife Evelyn brought home the big bucks, easily making 7 figures. Without a solid education or marketable skills, Raymond didn't have many options for high-paying work anyway. So he solely had to depend on his wife, and let's just say Raymond has some bad habits, so he blew money easily. Raymond stayed true to his word and kept my secret, but he'd often hit me up for small amounts of cash, like $100 or $2. He had some serious spending habits, especially when it came to blowing money on his vices. See, Raymond had some issues. He'd burn through all the money his wife gave him for the week or month, money meant for groceries and bills, on stuff like drugs and gambling. Then he'd be too ashamed to tell his wife Evelyn and come asking me for a loan. I'd usually cough up the cash, feeling sorry for him and wanting to help out. Also, I was grateful for the fact that he kept my secret. As Vince and I carried on with our affair, I found myself feeling happier, at least in the moment. But Richard started picking up on the gaps in our relationship. Even when he was home, I'd be glued to my phone, texting Vince behind his back. As Richard noticed our marriage hitting a rough patch, he went into overdrive to bring back the spark. He went all out with romantic gestures and surprise dates, trying to make up for lost time and bridge the gap between us. From spontaneous trips to fancy dinners, Richard tried everything to reconnect with me. He poured his heart into showing me love and affection, hoping it would fix what was broken. But despite his efforts, I couldn't shake off the guilt of my affair with Vince. No matter how much Richard tried, I just couldn't get back into the groove we once had. I was cut between guilt and excitement. I found myself in a tight spot. A few days ago, instead of going straight home, I decided to hang out with Vince for a change. We grabbed dinner, chilled for a bit, then headed back to my place. But when we got there, my heart sank, seeing my husband's car in the driveway. I panicked and signaled for Vince to split, pretending he wasn't following me. He took off as I pulled into the garage. My mind was racing. Walking into the house, I was shocked to find my husband there. I asked why he was home unexpectedly, preparing for the worst. But he brushed it off, saying he missed me and changed his plans last minute. I breathed a sigh of relief, but the close call left me shaken. As the night went on, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread, knowing how close I came to getting caught. It made me question everything and left me feeling even more stuck in this mess I'd made. At this point, I felt like a ton of bricks had hit me. I knew I had to dump Vince and focus on fixing things with my husband. Despite the thrill Vince gave me, I loved my husband too much to lose him. So, I decided to give it a few days, then call it quits with Vince and put my marriage first. But turns out my husband had checked my phone and found out my secret. That night, he acted cool, not letting on that he knew. The next day, he seemed fine, and we carried on like usual. He even said he wouldn't be traveling for a while, which made me genuinely happy and hopeful for us. As the day went on, I made plans to meet Vince for dinner after work, planning to end things with him once and for all. Work flew by, but I couldn't shake the thought of the upcoming chat with Vince. When I finally brought up going out for dinner, Vince was game, as long as I was picking up the tab. It was our usual deal, since Vince wasn't exactly rolling in dough. Despite the heaviness of what was to come, there was a weird sense of normalcy as we made plans to meet later. Deep down, I knew this dinner would mark the end of our secret fling and the start of fixing things with my husband. I braced myself for the tough talk ahead, knowing it was the first step to rebuilding what I'd messed up. We got to the restaurant and grabbed some grub. After chowing down, I knew I had to have the talk with Vince. I didn't beat around the bush. I straight up told him it was over between us. He seemed surprised and bummed out, but he took it like a champ, saying he got where I was coming from. Feeling relieved yet kind of sad, I hit the road back home. But when I pulled into the driveway, I spotted something weird on the porch. I hopped out of the car and checked it out, only to find my stuff piled up there. It was a total shock. My stomach dropped. I was totally shocked, like someone had sucker punched me out of nowhere. I hoped it was all a mistake, but as I went through my things, it was clear they were mine. I tried calling my husband, but he ignored me. Finally, a text popped up on my phone, and it was brutal. He didn't hold back, calling me every name in the book and accusing me of betraying him. He even dragged his best friend into it, saying he knew everything. In the text, he made it clear he wasn't going to let me off easy. He promised revenge that would haunt me, and to top it off, he reminded me that even the car I drove was a gift from him. Feeling completely shattered, I sat there in disbelief, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. It was like my whole world had just exploded, and I had no idea how to even begin picking up the pieces. Tears poured down my face as I realized the mess I was in. I tried calling my husband again, but he kept ignoring me. With no other choice, I had to leave. But since the car was his, I had to Uber it. Feeling lost and alone, I had nowhere to crash. My family wasn't around, and I just broke things off with James. So the only option left was crashing at Raymond's and his wife's house. Thankfully, they were cool about it and let me in. We waited till the next day when his wife was out before I spilled the beans to Raymond. Turns out he already knew. My husband had hit him up too, threatening him and telling him he would ruin him. I was terrified, like really scared for what was coming next. Now I felt totally exposed and unsure of what to do. It is like everything is falling apart, and I have no clue how to deal with it. I'm seeking guidance on how to handle and reconcile with my husband. He has a reputation for being incredibly cold and ruthless, someone you wouldn't want to cross paths with. While he seldom makes threats, when he does, he follows through with unwavering determination. If he mentions seeking revenge against me in the most extreme manner possible, I know he means it. Despite my attempts to reach out by phone, he's ignoring my calls. What course of action do you suggest I take in this situation? Update. Hey everyone, I'm sure you remember me as the woman who reached out for advice because I was terrified of the repercussions of my actions. I cheated on my husband, and his best friend helped me cover it up. I never thought I'd be back here updating you all, but I've received a lot of messages asking for updates, so here I am. It's been almost a month since I last reached out, and I want to update you all on what's been going on. Turns out my husband wasn't kidding about seeking revenge. I didn't even stay at Raymond and his wife's place for a day before I discovered that he had drained our joint account. Most of the money in there was his since he earns a lot more than me, but he took my share too. It might not have been much, but it was everything we had saved up together. So I was left with nothing. When I found out my husband had drained our joint account, I was devastated. I cried my eyes out, and even Raymond and his wife noticed. She offered to help me out financially, but that never happened after my husband got to her. It seems my husband went on a rampage to expose me. He must have snooped through my phone and found Vince's number, then tracked down Vince's girlfriend on Facebook. He spread screenshots of my chats with Vince and Raymond to everyone. My family, his family, Vince, Vince's girlfriend, Raymond, and even Raymond's wife. It literally felt like my whole world was crashing down. First off, I learned from Vince that his girlfriend had dumped him and kicked him out. He had no choice but to move back in with his parents to avoid being homeless. Then, Raymond's wife blew up when she found out he'd helped cover up my cheating. She believed cheating was wrong, and the fact that he'd assisted me made her think he was cheating too. Plus, she was furious about his gambling and drug use, which she'd suspected but never confirmed. She kicked both Raymond and me out, making it clear she was filing for divorce. We had to pool our money to afford a hotel room together, splitting the bill to keep costs down. And just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. My husband, knowing that Raymond kept drugs at home, decided to call the police on him. Raymond hadn't finished packing his things because he was still hoping his wife would take him back. So when the police showed up, they raided Raymond's and his wife's house. It was a total nightmare. Raymond was still trying to win his wife back because she was the main breadwinner, and without her, he'd be completely broke. But my husband's call to the police just made everything even more chaotic. The situation escalated quickly when the police arrived. Raymond and his wife were both arrested since they were the ones living in the house where the drugs were found. And of course, the kids were far too young to be involved in anything like this, so the blame fell squarely on Raymond or his wife. They ran a drug test, and it showed that Raymond was using drugs while his wife wasn't. It was pretty clear who was responsible. Raymond got arrested. Luckily, we'd already paid for the hotel, so at least I didn't have to stress about the bill. It might sound harsh, but I couldn't afford it on my own. Sadly, my parents refused to take me in after my husband spilled the beans about my affair. They're strict Christians and see cheating as a big no-no. They basically kicked me out and said I was never welcome back. And just when you think it can't get worse, I lost my job too. Vince faced the same fate. Everyone found out about our affair, and it was like we had targets on our backs at work. Vince had to quit to avoid being homeless, moving in with his folks. But for me, losing my job sucked even more because my husband's buddies with the boss, which made things way worse. We managed to cover about a week's stay at the hotel, but I'm already worried about what happens when the money runs out. I don't think I'll be able to afford it on my own. My only option now is to reach out to one of my siblings for a place to stay, but they all live out of state. It would mean starting over in a new place, but I'll have to wait until after the divorce. Richard's made it clear he's filing for divorce. He said he'll send someone with the papers, and I just have to let him know where I'm staying at the hotel. As for finding a job, I'm not feeling too optimistic. My resume isn't anything special, and the only reason I got my current job was because of Richard's connections with the CEO. I don't see much hope for getting anything out of the divorce. Since we don't have kids, there's no chance of child support. Plus, the house is in Richard's name, and it was a gift from his grandfather long before we even met. He had it before we got together. On top of that, we signed a prenup before we got married. And, well, there's the cheating. I can't imagine any judge would look kindly on that. So, realistically, I'm not expecting to get much, if anything, out of the divorce. It's a tough pill to swallow, but I have to face reality. Honestly, the person I feel the most sorry for in all of this is Raymond. He's facing serious consequences for drug abuse, and it breaks my heart. All he did was help me cover up my affair. I knew it was wrong, but I never imagined things would spiral out of control like this. My husband's actions have essentially ruined our lives. Right now, I'm homeless and struggling to find a job. Vince had to move away just to avoid being in the same boat. And now Raymond's behind bars, with little hope of getting out anytime soon. He can't even afford bail, so he's stuck there until they decide what to do with him. And it's all because of my infidelity. The guilt is eating me up inside. Raymond's wife has the money to help him, but she's not willing to lift a finger. She won't even shell out for a lawyer, so he's stuck with whatever the state provides. And we all know how that usually goes. Pretty lousy. On top of that, she's dead set on divorcing him, and there's no way Raymond's getting custody of the kids. He'll be lucky if he doesn't end up behind bars for the drug charges, let alone getting custody in the divorce. Even if he somehow avoids serious jail time, being homeless won't work in his favor in a custody battle. As for alimony, well, that's probably off the table too. Thanks to the sad fact that H signed a prenup, Raymond's not likely to see a dime. After all of this, my disdain for prenups has reached new heights. Did I mention that Evelyn, Raymond's wife, comes from a wealthy family? That's why he had to sign one. Either way, I hope you all can take something away from my story. Don't cheat. It's just not worth it. As for me, I'm left with two choices. I can swallow my pride and beg my siblings for money to buy a ticket and stay with them. But knowing them, that's a long shot. Or I can face the grim reality of ending up in a homeless shelter by next week. So please, learn from my mistakes and don't cheat. It's a road you don't want to go down.
They say true friends are great riches, but the only thing I've done is bring poverty to my best friend's life. I'm not speaking literally, I'm just trying to say that I have done something that is way too disgusting, and I don't know if I'm just a traitor or a heartless human, but my best friend is at fault too because she very much lied to me. I guess what's going on is just as a result of the seeds she planted. If she had been honest with me from the start, this would not have happened. As I'm writing this, my best friend's husband is lying right next to me on the bed, and he's watching me. I told him I needed time to think after we had a very important conversation this morning. If you're wondering what he's doing in the same room with me, he's naked. We spent the night together. In fact, we have spent many nights together. Hi Reddit, my name is Camila, and I'm a 24 years old dietitian. I'm not married, I'm single. I live in Los Angeles, California, in a rented apartment. I have a lot of friends. I'm the perfect definition of a social butterfly, and it's a title I carry so well. But amongst my many friends is my best friend, Tiana. Tiana and I met in college, and we've been inseparable ever since then. In fact, Tiana got married just 8 months ago to a real estate agent. His name is Davidson, and he's extremely rich. Back then in college, Tiana and I always spoke about our dream marriage and how we couldn't just wait to get married. I'm sure I'm not the only one that had a best friend who we could say those types of things to. Tiana and I even got an apartment together after we were done from college, but we decided to take separate apartments when we realized that it would be difficult for us to maintain our friendship when we lived together. Not all best friends live together, and I think I realized that it was what was best. When we lived together, we were constantly having arguments and disagreeing a lot, so we decided to have separate apartments in order to maintain the peace and harmony we had for each other. Tiana works at a fashion store, so we don't really get to see each other very often. That's why we decided to go on a group vacation with the rest of our friends. When Tiana got married, I was the chief bridesmaid as expected. I didn't know her husband until I saw him on the wedding day. She never seemed to talk about him until 2 months before they got married. I found that quite weird since we usually talked about everything. But I still showed up for her because she's my best friend, and I wanted to be there for her on her wedding day. Even my big brother and little sister tried to talk me out of it because they felt like she disrespected me by not telling me, but I didn't listen. I wanted to be there for her, but when I saw her husband some hours before the wedding, I immediately understood why she kept everything from me. Before I go on, and in case some people would ask me why I was so surprised and why I didn't ask to see his pictures before the wedding, let me put it out there that she never showed his face when she sent me pictures. She always showed pictures of him hiding his face while wearing a hoodie and came up, with the excuse of him not being a photogenic person. I always believed her because I've also been with guys that just don't want to take pictures because they didn't like it. But when I saw Davidson, I knew that Tiana had been lying to me. If she had called his full name, I would have known. She just called him by his middle name, which I can't mention here. While Tiana and I were in college, we usually attended nightclubs together. During one of those crazy nights out, Davidson asked for my phone number. He wasn't a student like me, and he came with his colleagues. I told him to hold on, and I ran to Tiana to ask for advice. I was used to the both of us sharing ideas and giving each other advice. When I told him he didn't seem like a student and cake with his colleagues from work, she advised me not to share my phone number with him because she felt like men like him were predators who exploited college students. I told her he looked like he was around our age and was good looking, but she told me to forget it. I listened to her before going to get myself another drink. I never returned to his table. So I was surprised to know that Tiana was getting married to the same guy that asked for my phone number. I almost lost consciousness because everything happened too fast and I was just too confused. I couldn't believe that Tiana would do that to me. She lied to me. That was the only reasonable explanation. I didn't dare Davidson or ever see him after that day, but I recognized his face and name. That's because Tiana and I always spoke about that particular incident. Davidson didn't notice me, so I walked away and tried looking for Tiana. But it was already time for the wedding and the priest had already walked into the church. I had to go stand beside the other bridesmaids and wait for Tiana to walk in. I had questions I was desperate for answers, but I had to follow the protocol and act calmly. I didn't want to cause a scene at my best friend's wedding, and I didn't want to get on her nerves, so I decided to wait till I heard her side of the story. Well, her side of the story didn't come till later that day. As for Davidson, he was very shocked when our eyes met and he raised his brows. I could tell that he had recognized my face. How could he not? He danced with me for a good 30 minutes before he finally asked for my phone number. We had a conversation and I wanted to give him my phone number, but I just wanted to tell my friend first. She ended up discouraging me, and that's why the both of us ended up not ever meeting again. Until his wedding day, of course. Throughout the wedding ceremony, Davidson kept staring at me, and I could tell that Tiana became very uncomfortable. I guess she could feel my eyes at the back of her neck even when I helped her arrange her gown. She couldn't look me in the eyes. If you ask me, it was like a scene straight out of the movie. Everything that happened was just too unreal, and the level of discomfort that wedding gave me is actually crazy. Fast forward till after the wedding, and before the reception, I pulled Tiana to the side to have a conversation because I'd been itching to speak to her. I urgently needed to know why she had been ignoring me all of a sudden, and why she was acting weird. Of course, I knew that she felt uncomfortable because of my very short history with Davidson, but I never jumped to conclusions. I wanted to speak to her first, and that's why I pulled her to the side. I started off by asking her why she was avoiding her contact with me, and she told me she was just nervous and the wedding stuff was getting to her. I called her down, then asked her why she didn't tell me that she got married to the same guy I met at the nightclub while we were in college. Ladies and gentlemen, you all needed to see how Tiana just decided to feign innocence. Now that I know the truth and what really happened, I can't help but praise her acting skills and condemn myself for being so gullible yet again. She acted so surprised, almost as if she had just heard the name before. She asked me what I was talking about, and I told her that Davidson was the same guy that asked for my phone number in the club while we were in college. I even had to add to the fact that Davidson was the real estate agent we kept talking about. She gasped and shook her head before telling me she had no idea he was the sake person. She told me she didn't know that Davidson was the one that asked for my phone number. According to her, she kept Davidson at her workplace when he came to get some clothes. I believed her back then, but now I think I am just really stupid. She pulled a Ronaldo live story on me. Seriously? She happened to meet a real estate agent who came to get some clothes, and he had to be the same person she warned me never to get with. Back then, I didn't even hold a grudge or get angry because at the end of the day, I knew that coincidences happened and there was every possibility that she was telling the truth. I also didn't think it was a big deal because Davidson and I never got in a relationship. We never even saw each other after that day, so I didn't think there was any need for me to be angry with her. I asked her why she hid his photos, and she told me she only did that because he was not the photogenic type. Cased closed, and that's all that happened that day. So it was quite surprising for me when I found out the truth just 1 month ago, but let me not get ahead of myself, guys. I don't want to leave out the important details because at the end of the day, I need to tell the truth. After the wedding, Tiana practically ghosted me. I'm not joking. I'm being 100% honest. She ghosted me and tried to make it look like we were having issues. It was difficult to see her and even have coffee together like we used to do. Seeing my best friend literally became a unicorn sighting. I didn't think it was an issue at first because I knew that it was 100% normal for couples to spend quality time together. But I discovered that she was just trying to make sure I didn't see Davidson. It was like a riddle to me, and I kept asking myself if I did something that would warrant such a behavior from my own best friend. It was at that moment that I remembered the fact that I realized that she might have been hiding him because of what I told her on their wedding day. I concluded that she didn't want to put the both of us in an uncomfortable situation when we dated before. Finally, she contacted me 2 months ago, and we started frequently again. I told her how angry I was for what she did, and she apologized, so we got back to talking and our friendship was back to normal. But I began to have little doubts here and there because of the way she treated me before. I just felt like she'd been a bad friend and I couldn't fully trust her. I also thought that she started acting out because she felt I was single, and she was married, so there wasn't supposed to be a relationship like before. I also noticed that she worked tirelessly to make sure I never came in contact with her husband. Unfortunately for her, all her efforts were in vain because just 1 month ago, I stumbled upon Davidson at my workplace. Yes, it was just a coincidence, Lowell. I'll be honest, I planned it. I wanted to meet him there, and I had to pull some tricks to get him to come to the place where I worked as a dietitian. I needed to find answers because I just couldn't understand why Tiana was behaving that way. Something told me that there had to be more to that story, or else she wouldn't have been acting the way she was acting. When Davidson arrived, I pulled him to the side and asked to have a conversation with him. He was very shocked when he saw me, and I could tell that he didn't expect to see me there. At first, he just stared at me and said nothing before he finally asked me how I was doing. Are you kidding me? I was very surprised that he asked me that question. I kept wondering why he asked that question. I know that it's just a normal question and people ask themselves that all the time, but I never knew that he would ask me that. That's what made me realize that he actually remembered my face and knew who I was. I couldn't believe that he still remembered me after all those years, so I didn't try to hide my surprise. Davidson asked me if I already had something to eat, and I told him I'd not had anything to eat yet. He asked if I had time to go get coffee with him, and I told him I did. I really wanted us to have time to talk because I knew that there was no way I would have time to speak to him one-on-one again. There was no time for me to even see him in his wife's presence, so I needed to see him personally. He has a car, so he drove me there. But I was surprised when we ended up driving into a restaurant. I didn't expect him to actually take me to a restaurant, not a cafe. I didn't say anything, though. I just followed him because I was hungry. Guys, you all need to see how he was actually very nice. He opened the car door and treated me with a lot of respect. When we sat down and got ready to eat after taking our orders, he asked me what I wanted to talk about. I suddenly got nervous, so I told him I'll speak when I'm ready. He didn't rush me, and then we just ate in silence. After eating, he asked me if I still remembered his face. I laughed at that and told him I still remembered him. He then asked me why I didn't give him my number while I was in college. I was shocked that he still wanted to know the answer to that. But before I made the move to tell him the truth, I wanted to hear from him first. Tiana was still my best friend, so I didn't want to potentially say something that could cause problems in her marriage. I just wanted to know the truth on my own terms without causing any drama. So guys, I asked him to tell me how he ended up marrying my best friend before I told him the truth. That's when my world literally shattered and I knew that I'd been deceived. I realized that I had been holding on to a fake friendship, and the person I'd traveled to go support on her wedding day ended up backstabbing me. If a person is so close to you that they are ready to ask for your opinion on simple things like giving a guy your phone number, you should know that they really consider you their friend. That's why it really hurt me to find out from Davidson that after he waited and didn't find me at the club, he just decided to wait for me for some time because his friends suggested he waited. Then he told me Tiana walked up to him and told him I wasn't able to come because I had a boyfriend. So my best friend, who I trusted so much, ended up giving him her phone number. And then they were in contact without my knowledge. The fact that she always referred to that incident and kept joking about it just infuriated me. I couldn't believe that my own best friend could do that to me, and that made me extremely angry. Even Davidson noticed how angry I was, and he asked me if I wasn't aware of everything all along. I didn't have any reason to stay loyal to Tiana because it was obvious to me that she hadn't been loyal to me. I told him that Tiana warned me not to go meet him that day. He was also surprised because obviously we had two different stories. Even though I was angry, I didn't want any drama, so I told him there was no need to speak to her about it. I didn't wait to taste the cocktail he ordered. I just hit him goodbye and tried leaving the restaurant. Yes, guy, I wanted to leave because I was just tired and upset. I needed to go back to work and just cool off. I'd already spent a lot of time having lunch with him, so I needed to get back to work. But before I left, he asked me for my phone number again. I told him there was no reason for us to exchange contacts and that it would do us no good, but he told me that it was something he wanted to do. Davidson told me that he wanted to be able to contact me as much as he wanted. I hurriedly gave him my phone number before I left the restaurant. After leaving that day, he was always in contact with me. He asked me out many times and even tried to take me out on dates. At first, I tried to ignore him and resist all the temptations, but I gave in at the end of the day and decided to give it a try. Yes, I practically betrayed my best friend by doing that, but even though I tried to pretend, I couldn't stomach the fact that she did what she did, and then when I asked her about it on her wedding day, she lied through her teeth and made a fool out of me again. If she had said the truth and didn't try to go around hiding the truth, I would have forgotten about it. The fact that she just made sure she lied to me and tried to keep me and Davidson from meeting because she knew that we'd find out the truth eventually. One day, during one of our hangouts, things got out of hand, and Davidson ended up taking me to a hotel. We slept together and spent the whole night together. Tiana kept calling his phone, but he didn't pick it up. After I slept with him, I felt bad, but whenever I remembered what Tiana did to me, I always told myself I was doing the right thing. The both of us had planned a vacation, and we were in contact with the rest of our friends. We were all supposed to bring our partners, and she told me she was also going to bring Davidson. I said I would come single, and I did. Before the vacation, Davidson told me he'd always asked Tiana to set us up even before they started dating, but she always said that I had a serious boyfriend and was likely going to get married. I kept all those things in mind till we finally went on the vacation. I didn't tell Tiana about it, and I never told her I'd been sleeping with her husband. We booked a hotel, and her room was almost directly opposite mine. Davidson and I acted like strangers in front of her, and I was sure she thought he didn't remember me. I knew that I was doing something horrible, but whenever I remembered that I could have been the one who got married to him, I just couldn't hold it any longer. There were many activities during the group vacation, but just yesterday they went camping in the mountains. I told them I wouldn't be able to go because I was tired. While I was alone in the room, Davidson suddenly came into the room. It was already late in the night by that time, and I asked where the others were. He said they were still camping and wanted to spend the night there. I got scared that we might get caught, so I asked him why he came back. He said he lied to have gotten a business call and told Tiana he needed to work all night. That's how we ended up spending the night together, and that's how he ended up naked on the bed right now. He told me just now that he wants us to take things to the next step and he wants to divorce Tiana. I told him I need time to think about it. Oh, hold on, I have to go, guys. Someone just knocked on the door. I hope we've not gotten caught. Update. Evil can never fight evil, and now I know I've been fooling myself. I've been so foolish to think that I could get back at my best friend by sleeping with her husband. Now karma has dealt with me, and there's absolutely nothing I can do about it. When I told you guys that someone knocked on the door, it was Tiana. Yes, guys. Apparently, she got suspicious that both of us were missing and decided to get back to see what we were up to. I think I let my guard down, and I should have thought about that because she has always been suspicious of us. When I opened the door, she was right there, and she didn't need a seer to tell her exactly what happened. She slapped me immediately and started a fight. It was Davidson that ended up separating us. I laughed in her face and called her a traitor for lying to me, and then she called me a fool for depending on her. It was crazy, and I couldn't believe that two ladies that were once best friends had grown so far apart that they called themselves disgusting names. It was not a nice sight to see, and I honestly felt like trash. But at the end of the day, I knew that what I did to her was unforgivable and what she did to me was unforgivable. I left the hotel that same day after packing my things. I saw no reason to stay anymore. I didn't feel bad at first because I felt like Davidson would end up choosing me at the end of the day. I was relaxed and waited for him to serve her divorce papers. But like all bad people, I didn't get a happy ending. He sent me a message via text and told me he couldn't leave Tiana because she threatened to file for divorce first and take half of his property if he left her. He also told me that she threatened to tarnish his image and ruin his name. I tried to make him understand that she was just trying to get into his head, but he blocked me after warning him never to contact him. It was at that moment I realized that he was just making excuses and was never really serious to begin with. He just wanted to get under my pants by making false promises. He knew he couldn't get divorced because he didn't want to ruin his image by having a marriage that didn't last a year. For me, it burned so hard because I realized that I'd wasted my integrity only to end up being embarrassed at the end of the day. It burned really hard and my karma hit very hard. The fact that even after all she did, Tiana won still breaks my heart. But I'll call a spade a spade. I had it coming.